Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for this opportunity to participate in the debate on Bill C-278. Canada has achieved remarkable success as a free, open, and prosperous democracy. We can be proud of our reputation as one of the best countries in the world in which to live. We have world-class cities, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention my own city, Vancouver, which was recently ranked the 6th most livable city in the world out of the top 140. So many have played a crucial role in the success of our country, including our public service, which was recently ranked as the most effective in the world. That was the finding of the International Civil Service Effectiveness Index, which is a joint project at Oxford University and the UK Institute for Government. The public service operates as part of the executive in a well-functioning system that consists of a number of important components. These include the legislature, the judiciary, civil society actors, and lobbyists. In fact, legitimate lobbying has played a key role in ensuring the government remains responsive to the needs of Canadians. Mr. Speaker, the public perception of lobbying is often negative, but lobbying is not about influence peddling or bribery. Lobbying is the process through which individuals and groups articulate their interests to parliamentarians and to government in order to inform public policy or decision-making. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, I've learned they also educate because they are deeply knowledgeable about their subject, and I, as a parliamentarian, may not be that deeply knowledgeable about so many subjects. Many interest groups, such as non-governmental organizations and advocacy groups, have government relations staff or consultants who speak with the government on their behalf. Take the environmental movement. Many of these organizations lobby or hire lobbyists to advocate for a range of causes, such as reducing greenhouse gases, conserving our wildlife, and protecting our lakes and rivers. These lobbying efforts help government to develop policy that better reflects the views and interests of Canadians. This is an important aspect of lobbying that is often forgotten. Clearly, Mr. Speaker, lobbying done ethically and transparently is a legitimate and fundamental part of our democratic system. We can't ignore the significant contribution from good and ethical cooperation between diverse interests. It can lead to the collaborative development of sound policy that reflects the expectations and needs of Canadians.
Further, Mr. Speaker, individuals, organizations, and businesses can and must make their opinions and ideas known to decision makers and politicians. For legislators, the problem consists in setting out clear rules to make sure that lobbying activities be conducted openly. And this is why the Lobbying Act is so important. This Act makes sure that lobbyists' activities are transparent without hampering freedom of access to state institutions. The Act requires that lobbyists register and provide monthly reports on their activities, especially their communications to office holders. This information is online in a public registry.
The bill before us today proposes 2 changes to the Act as it stands now. The First Amendment would require all corporations and organizations that lobby the government to disclose all funds received from foreign nationals, non-resident corporations, and non-resident organizations. The Act currently requires any entity that lobbies the government, whether they be domestic or foreign, to register with the Office of the Commissioner of Lobbying. The Act also requires corporations to disclose their parent company and subsidiaries, which may include foreign companies. Mr. Speaker, secondly, Bill C-278 would also expand the types of activities that lobbyists must report as, I quote, grassroots communications. As it now stands under the Act, lobbyists must identify the techniques they use to communicate with public office holders, including whether they use grassroots communication. Under the Act, grassroots communication means appealing to the public directly or through mass media to try and persuade them to communicate directly with a public office holder to influence their opinion. Bill C-278 would expand the definition of grassroots communication to include situations where lobbyists are encouraging the public or organizations to undertake activities that could indirectly influence public office holders. Mr. Speaker, any proposal to amend the Lobbying Act should be assessed against the principles of the legislation itself, which state that, 1, free and open access to government is an important matter of public interest. 2, lobbying public office holders is a legitimate activity. 3, it is desirable that public office holders and the public be able to know who's engaged in lobbying activities. And 4, a system for the registration of paid lobbyists should not impede free and open access to government. The amendments proposed by Bill C-278 could increase the reporting burden on lobbyists. They could also generate additional costs for the Office of the Commissioner of Lobbying to implement the changes to the registry and monitor compliance. It's important that any amendments to the Lobbying Act respect the principles of the Act, which seek to strike a balance between transparency and ensuring that the compliance burden imposed on lobbyists is reasonable and fair. Mr. Speaker, I welcome consideration of any measures to improve transparency in lobbying. As you know, our government is committed to raising the bar on openness and transparency in government. For example, our government was the first to open the doors for Canadians to see cabinet ministers' mandate letters, which under previous government were kept secret. We publicly report on how far we've come in keeping the promises we made. And government departments track the outcomes of their programs with indicators and then publish the results online for public scrutiny. We have an open data portal, which makes vast amounts of government data accessible, and we've taken this data portal from being a pilot project to a permanent program. Nous essayons aussi d'approfondir.
We're also trying to increase openness through a pilot project which has to do with a portal that would give the public access to internal working documents, and we have recently proposed major changes to the Access to Information Act, which includes the mandatory proactive publication for 240 government institutions as well as ministers' offices.
These are what led Canada to being elected chair of the Open Government Partnership Steering Committee for 2018-19. So, Mr. Speaker, our track record on openness and transparency speaks for itself. We are committed to the continuous improvement of the Lobbying Act, make no mistake, and we welcome this debate on the subject. I encourage all members to look carefully at these proposals with a view to balancing the interests of all stakeholders, the rights of lobbyists to advocate, the rights of those they represent, and the rights of Canadians to know how their government does business. So thank you for this opportunity to weigh in, and I look forward to the balance of this debate.